All right, we are going to talk about three metrics you need to be tracking as a Shopify founder to make sure that you can manage your cash flow, stay profitable, and grow your business for the long run. The reason this came about is more sales doesn't actually mean more profit. I have worked with Shopify brands for the last 9 years, and it's a common misconception that as your revenue grows, your profits are naturally growing. And in a lot of cases, that's not actually true if we're not tracking our profits properly. So I ran my own Shopify store for about 6 years. We took that from 50K in annual losses to a 7-figure brand before I sold that to an acquirer. And these are the metrics that I would track on a weekly basis in order to make sure our brand was profitable and prepped for sale. So first of all, what we need to do is we need to lay the foundation for our tracking, which is our gross margin and what we can afford to pay to acquire a customer. That is called our Break-Even ROAS, which is a return on ad spend. This is a common metric that you'll see in the dashboards of Facebook, Google, TikTok. And we need to know how much can we afford from a ROAS perspective so that when we're running our ads, we can determine, are we profitable? And if we're not, what do we need to do to become profitable? So this is the calculation that you can run. It is a combination of product costs, which is your COGS. That is how much do you physically pay for your product. So if you're buying it from China, by the time it gets to your warehouse, the landed costs, whether it's tariffs, shipping fees, import taxes, whatever it is, how much are you paying for that product? Your merchant fees, which is your credit card processing fee or your PayPal fee through Shopify. For this example, we're going to use 3%. And then your shipping costs, which is the cost that it goes from your warehouse or your 3PL to the customer. So that would be the label and any 3PL fees that you're paying. So in this example here, we're going to say that the customer is buying our widget from us for $50. And we are paying a total of $21.50 between the product costs, our shipping costs, and our merchant fees. That's the examples. You can use your own numbers here and you can change that. And then you take this calculation, which is how much the customer pays us divided by what the customer pays us minus our costs, and that gives us our break-even ROAS. And you can copy this and throw this in Google or a calculator. And that would look like this. And change this up to whatever you like. Let's say it costs us $27.50 and the customer is actually paying $60. Our break-even would be 1.84. So you can mess around with this metric and find out what your break-even ROAS is. This is why it matters. A lot of times we can be running ads, particularly when you're scaling, and you might think, oh, I'm paying $1 and I'm getting $1.80 back. That would be a 1.8 ROAS. You might think you're making money. But if your break-even number is a 2.0, meaning you need to at least double your money, you're actually losing money with every first purchase that you have. And this is very, very common, particularly with brands doing less than $100,000 a month. We usually haven't laid out these forecasts, and this is something that you should double check with your media buyer if you're running it yourself or if you're using an agency. Calculate your break-even ROAS and go have a look and see, are you actually making money on first purchase? The second thing, now that you know your break-even ROAS, is to track your marketing efficiency ratios. And at the end, I'm going to show you a simple scorecard that I use every week to track all this stuff and that you can use yourself to make sure that you're going in the right direction. So your MER, your marketing efficiency ratio, is your total revenue divided by your total marketing spend. This shows the overall performance of your marketing. So if we go back to the calculator here, let's say your store is doing $10,000 a month in sales and you're spending $4,200 on ads, and that could be added up all together. Say you're doing Instagram ads, you're doing Google ads, you're doing TikTok, all those platforms together, you spent $4,200, and your Shopify store is showing you that you're making 10 grand. Your MER would be 2.38, which is fantastic. We know that your break-even ROAS in this example is 1.75, so you're profitable. It's great news. This is where the second metric, AMER, comes in, which is your new customer or your acquired marketing efficiency ratio. The reason we track this is we want to isolate first purchase performance only, because as your brand grows, you're going to have a certain amount of customers who come back and make repeat purchases. And in this scenario, it looks like you're profitable. But let's say that your new customer revenue is $7,000. So you're doing $3,000 of repeat customer revenue and $7,000 of new customer. In this scenario, your AMER is 1.66. What does that mean? That means that on your first purchase, if we're going with the example of 1.75 as break even, you're actually losing money on every new customer you get. This is important because as you're scaling, one of the issues that you can run into is that at 10 grand a month, you're losing a little bit every single month, but you don't notice it. But if you scale to 30,000 and you're running this scenario, you're losing thousands of dollars on first purchase, but on the long term, your repeat buyers, you are profitable. But the bigger you get, you can run into a scenario where the business is profitable over a course of a year, but in a 60 or 90-day window, you can actually run out of cash. And as a small bootstrap founder, this is extremely important to manage your cash flow because you can go bankrupt while having a profitable business just because you don't have enough cash on hand to cover all of your expenses. So that's where the third metric comes in, is tracking your LTV. And you'll hear a lot of people talk about lifetime value, and often they're referring to how much is a customer going to pay us over the lifetime, but that doesn't matter as a bootstrap founder. What I like to track is something called 60-day LTV, and that is how much money is a customer going to give us over the first 60 days of being a customer with us. And this matters because we can float the cash for 30 or 60 days using credit cards and still run a profitable business, but we can't afford to do it for 12 months. So how does that work? Let's say first purchase, a customer pays $85. In Shopify, there is a report that shows you exactly how many people come back and make a second purchase within the first 60 days. So for this example, we're going to say 25%. So 1 in 4 customers will rebuy with us within the first 60 days, and their average order value on second purchase is $95. So this is how we calculate 60-day LTV. We take $85 plus 25% of this $95, because 1 in 4 people are doing it, and that gives us a 60-day LTV of $108.75. What does this do for us? It tells us that on average, our customers are not spending $85, they're spending $108 within the first 60 days, and that allows us to make better cash flow forecasts to determine whether it's okay to lose money on first purchase, and if we are, how much we can afford to lose, or ideally, we're profitable on first purchase. And with this calculation, we're making even more money over the first 60 days. So these are the 2 approaches to handling your 60-day LTV. As a small brand, this is what I recommend is scenario 1. This is profitable on first purchase, using 60-day LTV to increase our profit. And what that looks like here is $85 is how much they gave us. We're going to say our gross margin is 50%, and we can get that from the calculation we ran earlier. If we paid $40 to acquire that customer, we're making $2.50 on first purchase. When they come back and make a second purchase, that's bringing our profit margin up to about $14 within the first 60 days on every single order. This is where you want to be. When you get into larger scaling, you can start paying more to acquire a customer, say $50, but you're losing on the front end. So with this same example, this is our gross profit on first purchase. We paid $50 to Facebook. We're losing $7.50, but when they come back and they make a second purchase, it's going to increase our profits, and that would give us a gross profit of about $4. This is more of an advanced tactic, which we'll cover in further scaling. But it gives you an idea as to why sometimes people would be willing to lose money on first purchase. So what can you do with this now? These are what you need to do is get together, is you can make yourself a basic little scorecard. This is one that I use. This is from Digital Marketer. And you can track each one of your metrics on a weekly basis. And I sit down every Monday and I track these and I make sure that we are growing profitably. So the first thing is deciding on your gross margin and your break-even ROAS using that calculation that I provided, laying out your MER and your AMER targets of what you can afford to spend, and then calculating your 60-day LTV to know how much of your customers are coming back and making a second purchase. Track each one of those on your scorecard every single week. And then what we can do from there is start to lay out what are the marketing activities that we should do to increase our LTV. Can we build up more advanced email flows? Can we use SMS to get them to make a second purchase? Is there stuff we can do with our landing pages or our ads in order to increase our ROAS so that we can afford to pay more for a customer because it's converting more? If any of this is making sense to you, what you can do is you can sign up below. I have a profit newsletter where every single week I'm going to send out tips, tools, templates, different stuff that I'm using to increase the profit of my brand and what you can do to increase the profits of your brand. And if you have any questions, leave a comment down below. Happy to reply. Thanks.